feel free to turn off your camera if you want, or whatever makes you feel comfortable, but we just wanted to mention that up front. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and please let me know if you are able to see that. Can everybody see that at the moment? Does it say welcome to the Lenten book study? Yes. Okay. Awesome. So welcome, everyone. It's so good to be with you. We're going to go ahead and get started. So this is our first session, Tuesday, February 28th, 2023. We are reading Henri Nouwen's Spiritual Direction. Just to give you an idea of kind of where we're headed tonight, we already did the quick welcome and introduction. We're going to move into just a brief 5 to 10 minute summary of what's been read in the book so far, the introduction, chapters 1 and chapters 2. And that's for anybody that wasn't able to read the book yet, or if anybody just kind of wants a refresher of what's been said so far. Then we're going to have a brief whole group discussion about some of the questions that Henri Nouwen presents. And then we're going to try what we hope to be a fun choose your own adventure activity. We're going to open up a couple different Zoom rooms with some different options. And you all will be able to choose what you'd like to do. And then we'll have a quick wrap up. My promise to everyone is that we will be done by 8:30. Definitely want to respect everybody's time, especially because it is a school night for me. And so we'll definitely be done by 8:30 out of respect for everybody's time. Just a couple of I spoke with Pastor Aaron, and we just kind of talked through some of our vision about what this might look like. And we just want to encourage everyone, please feel free to come, even if you aren't able to read the book or keep up with it each week. We don't want that to be a barrier for anyone not to come, right? Like these are important, big questions that we're going to be talking about. And so if these questions intrigue you, please feel free to come. Don't feel like you have to read or keep up with it in order to join us in the group. Please, we want you to participate as much or as little as you are comfortable with. That's part of the reasoning behind giving the flexibility with the different choices and things like that. And please share your voice. We're going to be trying a couple of new things in this book study that we might not have tried before. So we want your feedback. Let us know what works, let us know what you like, and let us know what doesn't. So first, I'd like to invite everyone in, since this book is on spiritual direction. I'd like to invite everyone into just a minute of silence as a way to sort of center ourselves. On Sunday, Pastor Aaron spoke about all the voices that are constantly clanging for our attention. And so I'd just like to invite everyone for 1 minute into a minute of silence. All right, thank you, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. So I'm going to just give a quick summary of the introduction in chapters 1 and 2 so far, again, in case anybody wasn't able to read it this week or in case you need a refresher. So we are reading Spiritual Direction by Henri Nouwen. It's actually not technically by Henri Nouwen. It was published posthumously by a couple of his students. But they did compile some of his teachings and his writings. And so it is his teachings and writings. But Henri Nouwen was a Catholic priest. He was an author and a teacher. He taught psychology and theology at Notre Dame, Yale, and Harvard. So he was kind of a smart guy. But he also worked at a community in Toronto called L'Arche Daybreak, where individuals with mental disabilities lived in community with their caretakers. And that's really neat because he didn't just write about some of his ideas, he actually lived them out, which is always commendable. And so in the introduction, Nouwen invites the reader to create space for God in their lives, He says that God can be found everywhere, but in particular, he mentions the ability to find God within, in our heart, in the book, which is Scripture, and in the community with one another. And there's a lot of great quotes from the introduction, but one that stuck out to me was, a faith community reminds us what is really happening in the world and in our lives. And I know that I'm thankful that Hot Metal definitely gives space to allow us to realize what's going on in the world. One of my favorite parts of the service is always when we share out our joys and our concerns as a community and just find out what's going on with one another. And so the big question from the introduction is, where do you have or need space for God in your life? In chapter 1, the title is Who Will Answer My Questions? Nouwen starts off by mentioning a Zen master parable in which a young man who is seeking questions and directions in life goes to a Zen master and asks some of these questions, and the Zen master tells him to follow him. And at first, it might seem like there's a big bridge or a big difference between this parable that most likely takes place in a Buddhist context in Asia, right, versus a Western Christian context like we are a part of. But the point is that people all over the world are asking the same questions, these same big questions that keep popping up over and over. What is truth? What is the right way of living? Who is God, right? And Nouwen points out that it's really important to be able to ask these questions within the context of a supportive community, right? It can actually be a little bit dangerous to ask these questions to the wrong people or in the wrong place. Some of us may have experienced that in some faith context or communities that we've been a part of in the past. And one quote that I love from chapter 1 is that, Nouwen says, our lives are not problems to be solved, but journeys to be taken with Jesus. And I think, unfortunately, mainstream Christianity a lot of the time does try to solve the problem, right? By offering easy answers, half truths. All you have to do is X, Y, and Z, and you'll be fine, right? And what Nouwen means by living the questions is that these questions do not and will never have easy answers, right? In fact, by asking these questions, you might get more questions, right? And anybody that tells you differently is probably lying, right? Anybody that offers these easy answers is probably not being honest. And so Nouwen says that you have to live the questions and that it's a process. It's very important, and I love that Hot Meadow does this too, to affirm the validity of the questions, right? Not all faith communities are able to do that. And so the question from chapter 1 is, what questions are you currently living into? And then finally, chapter 2, the title was, Where Do I Begin? In this chapter, Nouwen gives a lion in the marble parable, where there's a sculptor sculpting stone, and there's a little boy that's watching the sculptor day after day. And eventually, the sculptor sculpts this beautiful lion out of the rock, out of the stone, right? And at the end, the little boy is astounded, and the little boy says, Sir, how did you know that there was a lion within that stone? Right. And the idea here, of course, is that there is a lion in each of us, not a powerful, strong lion, but rather the image of God inside of all of us. Right. And sometimes you have to chip away the rock and the stone in order to be able to see that. And the way that that's done is through spiritual disciplines. Nouwen says disciplines are the skills and techniques to see the image of God in our heart. And this is accomplished through listening. But like Pastor Aaron told us on Sunday, there's resistance. There's a lot of resistance, right? There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of voices trying for our attention. And so we have to learn how to have attentiveness. So, learning to listen, where is God active and where are we being led? So the big question from chapter 2 was, where is God active in your life and where are you being led? So with that being said, I'd like us to open up some space to sort of briefly discuss some of these questions. One thing that always kind of stresses me out, I'm a slow processor, right? So whenever somebody asks these questions, I always appreciate just a little bit of time to think about them. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to just put on the timer for 2 minutes to allow everyone to kind of think through maybe it's one of these questions or what you what resonated with you as we were kind of talking about these questions, and then we'll open up the floor to discuss that a little bit. So let me put the timer on for 2 minutes, and then we'll come back together as a group. Okay, I apologize. That was only 1 minute, but for the sake of time, is that enough time for everybody? Okay, I want to make sure that to be respectful of time. So let's go ahead and open it up for discussion. Just kind of what maybe from what we just discussed, what resonated with you? What are some of the questions? And you know, even in at the service on Sunday, we wrote down some of these questions from our hearts, right? And we posted them on the wall. So let's just kind of open it up and what are we thinking? What are we feeling with some of these questions that Nouwen poses?
I always struggle with this idea of making room for God, because I'm like, this is my job. Like, why is it so hard for me to find room to do this? So I always welcome like these set aside seasons for that reminder for myself too, to be more intentional even than what I've been. So yeah, and then what, you know, the way he is framing it, like that. I always walk into Lent, right? Does anyone else have this problem with them? I'm gonna walk out so much more holy than I was in the beginning. And I love, you know, what we're doing this year, which is kind of just like, I'm gonna walk in and I'm gonna ask a lot of questions instead of like have a end goal in mind in the making room, right? Like, and I'm making room for questions rather than making room for my totally awesome holiness. That'll like totally be so wonderful. It's what it's made me think.
Aaron, I love that poem that you started with on Sunday. It reminded me a little bit of Billy Joel, We Didn't Start the Fire, with that rapid fire, you know, recitation of all the things that come to mind. But the noise, it just really beautifully captured our captivity to noise. And one of the things that is a gift of recent retirement and also going on a bit of a retreat is trying to listen a little bit less to all the noise and slowing down. And that's good. That's hard for task-driven people. But that's kind of where I am, just trying to reduce all the noise, and that's part of my challenge right now.
I understand that. We're very intentional about our prayer time. We begin every day with extended prayer, but I understand about the silence was the thing that sort of got to me when you gave us that minute of silence tonight. The first thing that leapt to my mind was the sounds of silence. Of course, maybe that's a '60s things, but yeah, we have a moment of silence. We have a moment of silence, and that's what's playing in my mind.
That quote, a faith community reminds us what is really happening in the world and in our lives. That kind of resonated with me because we haven't been in a physical church since the pandemic, and I really feel out of touch and out of the loop. And we're so used to being really involved in the church, and so it's something that I really missed, and just being in different parts of ministry, and so something that resonated with me.
Funny. So I think my entire life has been about questions, but the typical ones, problem of evil, all of this. I think right now I've been wrestling with what is church.
Mhm.
What so the typical questions about what makes a church and what's the function of the church and all of that, but I really believe that church is going to be a very different something moving into the future, and trying to figure out what that is. Kathy and I belong to this women's group. We meet every other week, and we've kind of wrestled with that question as well. And for me, so community is definitely part of it, but at I don't know what it means to be church in COVID during the pandemic. And everybody seems to be talking about coming out of the pandemic, but there's really nothing that's changed. The virus is still around and we could still catch it. And we've got 90-year-old parents. And so we're trying to figure out that. So how do you be community at the same time dealing with, people who are vulnerable? And I don't know, so that's kind of really big. Another question is, I'm probably going to be nearing retirement soon, and questions of legacy, but also I've lived, a good portion of my life trying to, kind of fighting injustice. And so do I let go of that now because my vocational life is not, I don't have the access to those spaces that well? Or does it change in some way? Can I afford to let go and let somebody else, continue that charge? If so, then how is God going to use me then? In what way? I don't know. Oh, it's a big chapter change, and I'm not looking forward to it just because of the questions.
Well, it sounds like, Debbie, you're living those questions at the moment.
Yeah, what you said, Debbie, kind of resonates with me too. I've been really involved with church and church things and all the things since I was a child. And as a kid, I couldn't wait to be thought fit to help with Sunday school. And so I started that journey, and so I've done all the things, and part of me feels like, as far as there's so many areas of my life, I feel like I am turning the corner, and I do need to take a step back from some things, although I don't know what. So that's looking into those questions. And I've also been largely an extrovert, lived my life as an extrovert. And now I find myself wanting silence and solitude more, but then asking the question, is that maybe just being laziness, like to go, not be the person with all the responsibilities for a chapter. Let's just act like I won't be retired. I'm still be working for a while, but just act like a semi-retired person and do whatever I feel like doing. But that doesn't feel right either. So living into that, okay, so now I'm 70, so what? Like what? We tend to make decisions based on, I don't know. I loved our life living in China, and that was its own chapter. But that leads to sometimes feeling like, what are we doing here? Like there's, we could go do, but then we make decisions based on all of our grandchildren are here. And so as grandparents, can we just, it's gone? Is that the thing to do? Because, anyway, that's a questions I'm living into.
I'm finding quite a bit of silence and reflectiveness. I cut back on my work, so I'm only working 3 days a week, semi-retired.
No, I have less silence.
Yeah, she has less silence. But my mother is in a nursing home and has been there just a little over a year. She's 99 and has some dementia. And so spending time with her can be sometimes difficult because she can't remember much or hold conversations. But other times when I'm there, it's kind of interesting because I feel so, just being with her makes me feel like I'm doing the most important thing in life at that time. Because she'll occasionally just say, oh, we have such good conversations, when she can't remember what she had for dinner. But she appreciates, yeah, or if she went to dinner, but she appreciates me being there, and she just, she always tells me about how she's looking up and ready to go to heaven, and what's taking so long. So being with someone that's that close to dying is very interesting. It lets you know what really is important. Those hours here and there that I spend with her seem much more important than trying to accomplish something at home or, getting some task done. So I'm finding God in those disoriented moments.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm kind of like wrestling with right now too is I really want to make more space for God in my life, like day to day, and kind of reincorporate him after experiencing, a lot of hurt with the Bible being weaponized. But it's strange because I've only done that before in my life because of like the way guilt has been used to do it. And so I'm trying to reincorporate that like into my routines and like, make that space so that I can listen to God. But it's so difficult to take a step away from that guilt. But I like want to make sure if we're building foundationally again here, that like guilt isn't part of that it's like this desire to seek a relationship with God instead of a thing that you should do.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because one thing that Pastor Aaron and I talked about is Hot Meadow has traditionally been a place of deconstruction, right? But then what comes after that, right? Like, what is the reconstruction that comes once that's, finished? And that's a big question. Awesome. Well, friends, thank you for sharing. I hate to move on. I do want to say, if you want to continue this conversation, you're going to have an opportunity to do that in just about 3 minutes. But I just want to move us into the next space, just because I want to make sure that we're respectful of time. So one thing that we want to try with our book club this time around, and let me share my screen and show you. So we wanted to make this as meaningful as possible for everyone. So we're going to attempt to do sort of a choose your own adventure. Some of us might remember those books from when we were kids, right? And so how this is going to work is, in just a moment, we're going to open up 3 different Zoom rooms, and you have the opportunity to choose how you want to participate. So the first room is sort of the social or discussion room. So if you want to keep having the conversation that we were just having and continue to talk to people, and you feel like you're definitely in a social mood, that's for you. Room number 2 is the silent room, and then room number 3 is the guided contemplative practice. I'll explain those in just a minute. I just wanted to mention real quick why we're doing this. We're attempting to offer flexible participation and choice. And it's our hope that that's more meaningful, right? Because everyone's coming to this with different needs. Some of us are more social than others. Some of us might be tired or exhausted or have children to attend to. And so we want to make this as meaningful and impactful as everyone. And since you know best what that looks like, we wanted to offer choice. And remember, this is sort of a trial and error. So we definitely want to hear your feedback about this too, things that you like and things that you didn't like. So once again, room number 1, social discussion room. This is for those that want to engage in discussion with others. Feel free to use the questions or create your own, take it wherever you need to go. Pastor Aaron will be with you in this room, but this is best for those that feel social at the moment. Room number 2 is a silent room. So this room is for those that want to experience some silence, and you can feel free to use this time to write or journal, to pray, to meditate, or maybe read the book if you haven't had a chance yet. This is best for those that are looking for more of a quiet meditative space. And then room number 3 is guided contemplation. So at the end of each chapter in the book, there's a guided spiritual exercise. And that is essentially what this room is for. And so this week, the practice at the end of the chapters was journaling as a spiritual discipline. So for those that are interested in this room, here are some prompts. You're more than welcome, of course, to journal about anything that you like, but these are some prompts if you need some guidance. So what's a persistent question on your heart at this time? How do you listen attentively to God? And what are you hearing right now? And what are questions you would like to explore either within community or perhaps with a spiritual director or mentor? So at this time, we're going to go ahead and just offer you all a choice of which room you'd like to be in. We'll say maybe 15 minutes. That'll take us to 8:25. We'll come back. Pastor Aaron will be with the social discussion group. I'll be with the guided meditation group. And if you choose silence, no one's going to bother you. You'll be on your own. So feel free to go ahead and choose what room you would like to participate in. And we'll see everyone back here in 15 minutes.
How do you choose what room you're in?
You're muted.
Did it pop up?
No, it hasn't popped up yet.
Oh, I might have to.
And do you want to pause the recording?
Yeah.
8:30. So I just wanted to open up some space for a quick debrief, for a wrap up, to ask if anybody would like to share, what were some takeaways from your time, either in the discussion or in your journaling. If there's anything you'd like to share with the group, or perhaps some final thoughts or questions.
Well, I realized that the persistent question on my heart is how do I listen to God attentively? So they're kind of overlapping there. I just have my doubts about, and just am confused a little bit about that.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Annette.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate the way that this idea of asking questions ties into the sanctified art and what we've been sort of committed to for the whole Lenten journey. I thought that was really meaningful, and the Ash Wednesday service also was really meaningful to me, and sort of for me framing this idea of living between Ash Wednesday and Easter is sort of that, holding that tension is all of the questions in between. So there's the sort of confession and repentance and this idea of being really not all that we want to be, and then the promise of wholeness and healing and completeness, I guess, and questions live with us in that tension. So for me, it's just been like all had a really cool synergy, and that's been adding meaningfully to my sense of God being with us on this journey.
Thanks, Tammy.
I really appreciate the input from Michaela earlier, or was it Joanna? About the making space, feeling like something guilted into, and I wrestled with that quite a bit. It took up most of my brain space during my journaling. Like instantly I think of exercise because it's something on my should do list, and automatically by the end of the day it's on the guilt list because I didn't do it. And like, and then I got thinking about a relationship is typically one that has some level of love to it. And those you don't typically do out of guilt. And so what is it that I do to reflect love or receive love in my life that I can use as an example and stepping stone from that into my relationship with God without it getting too messy. So obviously there's a bunch of words on my page here as I process that. But the other thing I mentioned was how much I appreciated the epiphany that came to me Sunday from Pastor Aaron's sermon, when Satan was tempting Adam and Eve and Jesus with the option of knowing how it will work out. And I don't know if I just heard it at the right moment when my heart was ready to receive that, but if that were Satan talking to me, you better believe I'm biting that apple. I want to know how this is all going to work out, and I want to know the right way to do things, and I want to have answers. And so Sunday, I've been really processing that whole aspect of not really needing to have the right answer, just to have the questions, to sort of trust. Yeah, so that was sort of my input from today and from Sunday.
Thanks, Joni. I as you were talking, I just thought of a quote that reminded me of what you were saying. I think it's by Paul Tillich, and it says, "The opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty."
Yes, right.
So I was just reminded of that as you were talking, because I too would have taken that apple and want that certainty. Well, friends, it is 8:33. So I really do want to be mindful of time. I'm happy, to stay on for a few minutes in case anybody else, wants to share, but I just wanted to thank everybody for being here today. And I did want to remind us that our next group is going to be next Tuesday at 7:30. We'll tackle chapters 3 and 4. Spoiler alert, we will not be providing any answers to these questions. But the questions are chapter 3, who am I? And chapter 4, where have I been and where am I going? So I just want to thank you all so much for being here. I want to encourage everybody to live into the questions this week. As Tammy said, they are the bridge, right? That holds up the tension. I like that a lot between Ash Wednesday and Easter. It's really beautiful. And so I just want to encourage everyone that, like we said on Sunday, there is room for all of this and all of these questions and doubts and fears. So yeah, thank you so much for being here.